This meeting is being recorded.
This is Canon Fodder, episode 63, live from the Matrix. I am joined by my good friend, Mr. B. Sir, how are you?
I'm doing well, thank you. How are you doing, Mr. Hudson?
And, I wanted to thank you right off the top for being flexible with me in terms of, scheduling, because, we had a tough time with scheduling this.
No worries. I'm always happy to dedicate my time for literature, but even though I'm not probably going to bash the book a bit, I'm happy to discuss it.
So when I
We
read
suffer for art.
Oh, most definitely. And I'm not gonna lie. Reading this was kind of a suffer for me. I'm not the biggest cyberpunk fan, and I tried to read it in the past, and this is the first time I was able to make it through. So, can you explain to me like what the appeal of cyberpunk is? I think I kind of get it, but if you could just enlighten me a little bit.
I think cyberpunk was mostly a product of its time, and I have to admit this. This was the third time I'm reading this book. The first time I read it out of curiosity, and the second and third time I read it because you pitched this episode to me.
Mm.
And I had the same experience. On first read, I actually enjoyed it, but on the second and third read, I found it to be quite a slog, and I had
Yes,
to
yes, it
fight
was a
myself to finish
slog.
it. But the appeal of cyberpunk, especially during the 80s and 90s, you can imagine as Japan was ascendant and the personal computer and later on the internet became mainstay items. Uh, the best way I can probably explain it is it became fandom.
Mm.
The computer and cybernetics. I think I'm going to offend all the theory cells in the audience, but I think cybernetics itself is just a fandom of technology. So
Mm.
the
Can you
whole
can you expand on that a little bit?
yeah. So you had people that engage with the subject of human-machine interface, and they engage with it very seriously, and they created very interesting things that remained with us until today. A lot of this work was done at a little place called Xerox Park. You may have heard of Xerox. Those still exist. And they developed interesting things that we take for granted today, like the laser printer and the mouse. So a lot of work on human-machine interface happened during that period, and those people made very interesting both hardware and software. The software has been partially abandoned, but it still has people who swear by it. If you look at systems like Smalltalk was also developed at Xerox Spark, and it's very different from any other programming system you can imagine.
Mm.
Um, it is meant to be way more intuitive and uh, not for people who got butt broken by trying to simulate a CPU in their head.
I do so to give cyberpunk its due, because this is actually the second cyberpunk novel that I'm covering on this show. The first one being Neil Stephenson's
Snow
Snow
Crash.
Crash. Yes,
Yeah,
which
and I intentionally avoided that episode prior to this
oh,
discussion.
you did. Okay,
Yeah,
fair
it's in my
enough.
backlog. I didn't want it to color my impressions.
Fair enough. But so I kind of got, I guess you could say, both sides of the cyberpunk genre, the sort of outlandish silliness and the grimdark seriousness
Yeah,
of
and we didn't explain like the appeal of cyberpunk and where it came from, but so you had the people who engaged with the subject, practically, and then you had all the theory cells who uh, were suddenly straddled with this new machine and this new um, undiscovered country and new horizons, and they tried to to apply themselves to it and apply their methodologies and knowledge and modes of thinking to it. And sometimes it worked, and sometimes it birthed interesting things or interesting subjects, and it's stuff you might enjoy very much talking about over beers, but I still doubt its practicality.
And I will say, as far as science fiction goes, right, the cyberpunk genre has a unique place in the science fiction canon, I guess, in that it is the genre that was more than mere speculation, right? There was a lot going on at the time that the genre was created that fed into the stories, and then what came out of that story became the internet. Let's say, like you could read Arthur C. Clarke, right? You could read Asimov, and like Asimov to me reads like a technical manual for space travel most of the time. But we're not yet at the stage where we can actually test their theories out in the real world. Whereas with cyberpunk, you can pretty easily, if you have a laptop job at home, you are jacking into the network every day.
Yes, and many of the interesting things about cyberpunk, and reading Neuromancer, you always get the feeling of, well, this is John Cyberpunk, and he's waking up in his cyber bed and eating his cyber breakfast and drinking his cyber coffee. But it's part of what makes it feel like a fandom. But the world, and this is why I think that both Neuromancer and Snow Crash are important, because even though I would not recommend the listeners actually read this book because it's not very good. But if they're interested in understanding how...
And that's an episode, folks. We'll catch you next time.
Yeah. but if they are interested in how our current days were shaped and what precipitated many of the ideas that we have today, and especially among tech leaders, understanding how these ideas came to be and how they influenced them, then Neuromancer and probably Snow Crash, which I have put off reading until this discussion, are a must-read. And this is how I want to... This is one angle from which I want to engage with this book. In terms of which predictions it got right and what it got wrong. And another angle that I'm really interested in is how much of the
for me, the
terminology of the book became ubiquitous today.
Yes.
Right? Jacking in the Matrix. Have you ever heard of the Matrix, kids? Remember the Matrix, 99? It's the Matrix is coined basically here.
Right.
83.
I mean, we do the book starts off with Case, who is our protagonist, unable to properly interface with the Matrix because the cybernetics that were installed into him that allowed him to be a hacker were damaged due to some corporate espionage that he pulled.
I understood it slightly differently, actually, and in terms of literary intertextuality, I think that as opposed to later understandings of cyberpunk, how do you call it, console jockeys, or the people who jack into the Matrix, in theory, anyone can do it in the Neuromancer world. Case is just really, really good at it.
Right, yes.
He's a natural. And he basically had a fall from heaven. Because for him, it was heaven. He was living and breathing the Matrix for as much as he could, and
He
he
was
got
huffing
too
that
greedy.
galaxy gas.
Yeah, and he got greedy, and he double-crossed his employers, and they punished him. They burnt out his ability to interface with the Matrix, and he fell down into the world of flesh, cast out from heaven.
Right. And so the thing about the cyberpunk genre is that the Matrix, whether it's the metaverse or the Matrix or what was it called? Did you see that stupid Ready Player One movie?
No, I avoided it.
No, fair enough. They have their own sort of verbiage for what it is as well. But it was what do you call it? Anyway, the world that exists outside of the metaverse is like fallen, disturbing, disgusting. Like you don't want to inhabit it, so you escape to cyberspace, and that is noteworthy in the canon of science fiction, because we're coming out of the golden age of sci-fi, when Heinlein is writing, and when Asimov, Philip K. Dick even has a little bit of this, but everybody had this optimism. Either we were about to get to the moon or we had gotten to the moon, and we believed that we were on this trajectory as a species, that we were going to be an interplanetary species. And by the time that Neuromancer comes out, we've kind of hit the malaise of the 70s and 80s,
The
where
hangover was setting in.
exactly where all we can kind of hope for is an escape from the hell that we've kind of created.
And this is a persistent theme in um, this book in particular, that the form of escape is not the escape like you would imagine in Tron or with other metaverse instantiations or understandings. Because here, the Matrix, maybe we should explain to the listeners what exactly Case is or was, which is this universe's understanding of a hacker. But the way humans interface with computers is either through dumb terminals, like you would in the 70s and early 80s,
Right,
because this
right.
book was written in 83, or through total sensory immersion. And you just interface with the raw data. And since your brain can't really process this raw data, it is usually rendered geometrically in shapes and sizes and structures. So this is what comprises the matrix. Like data that sits together and just looks like a building.
And I wanted to, and I'm glad you bring that up, because I think it plays into two aspects of the book. The twin AIs that need to come together in order to become sort of a super consciousness, right? And then also the end of that, where the now sort of brought together AI is creating life.
Is it?
Or at least it's creating like the facsimile of life.
It can imagine. It can let its imagination run loose in the matrix.
Right. Well,
Because AIs, we are jumping way ahead of ourselves, I think.
right,
but,
right.
The way AIs are, and let's even go a further step back. This is the time period in which artificial intelligence was studied. That this was when AI research began, and there was a lot of excitement about it and a lot of fears, right? our mutual friend, the Prudentialist, always likes to talk about the accident. So, right as AI was conceptualized, people started worrying about what would happen with runaway AI. And this is another theme in the book. You even have the Eliezer Yudkowsky Corps chasing our protagonist uh, across a space station because humanity is deathly afraid of AI running amok, and they don't even know what it's capable of. And this is one of the open questions left from the book, but this all connects. There are a lot of fears, especially during the 80s, both from the Cold War, which they also manifest in this book, from Japan, which was economically and technologically ascendant, from technology, both from how it will influence us, and from where I will go from drugs. Drugs are everywhere in this book. People have drugs for breakfast.
Yes, it's very inspired by Philip K. Dick in that sense.
Yes.
His love of drugs, really.
Mhm.
Oh,
The catch line of low life, high tech really comes through.
and there's also this there's also this complete uh, case treats living in the real world as a punishment, right? And he is punished. You're completely right. His former employer does punish him by breaking his central nervous system, basically, and he is not really allowed to fully interface with the Matrix. But it's such an odd it's such an odd thing to say that, oh, hey, you existing in the real world, actually, that's a fate worse than death.
Yeah, that's disgusting. That's the flesh. And he abjures the flesh. He hates it,
Right.
he
Yes.
despises it, and he's spiraling.
Very Gnostic book, you could
Yeah.
say.
Well, not necessarily, because it is not represented as a healthy place to be in,
Mm.
because um, Case's relationship with the Matrix and his vocation is portrayed more as an addiction, because the world can be, fulfilling, satisfying. People try to make human connections with Case, and since he has a death wish and he is spiraling and trying to destroy himself, uh, both with drug abuse, and trying to run uh, riskier deals than he should in the underworld of Chiba City in Japan. He is on a course towards certain death, and I don't think that his state of mind or relationship with the Matrix or the people around him is portrayed in any healthy manner. And the characters around him even warn him, artiste, you're going to die.
Now, and that kind of gets back to the other interesting aspect of Neuromancer for me. Where at the end, you have the Wintermute slash Neuromancer amalgamation, uh, looking for anything sort of on its level as a super consciousness. He toys with the idea of going far out into space in order to find it, but at the end, Case sees a replica of himself and his ex-girlfriend together, as well as the recreated CD-ROM, the recreated ROM file of his mentor Paulie. So as much
Which
as
is a cute
Case,
reference which I enjoyed.
yeah, but as much as Paulie or sorry, as much as Case has this devil may care, death wish, he's never going to actually die now. He is part of the Matrix forever in a way that he wasn't before. He's completely through this advanced AI. He's really shed his humanity, and he is part of the thing that he is one with his true love, which is the Matrix.
It reminds me of the meme, playing with your dolls, are you? It's interesting that the first thing the AI does when it awakens, let us say, is look for look for companionship,
Mm.
look for peers,
Right.
you might say,
Right.
and um, make companions, make dolls to play with. It's very childlike.
It reminds me of have you read Watchmen by Alan Moore?
Yes, unfortunately.
Well, I mean, I think it's a pretty solid work, but one of the things that the Doctor Manhattan sort of bemoans is that he is unique, that he is really
Yes.
he's the only thing in his like himself,
He has no one to
and
relate to.
one of the reasons that he ultimately comes back to try and save humanity and care about humanity again is because I think he would be completely alone without it. And I don't know. I've always found that aspect interesting of even if you I don't know your religious background, but even God is in three persons.
Mm-hmm.
He is Father, Son, Holy Spirit. So even he, while the Godhead is one, he is three people, which is I don't know where you want to go with that, but that's just an interesting thing to note that nothing should be alone and nothing should be by itself, I guess.
Mm-hmm. That's an interesting idea. I haven't considered it. And the the theme of, you can say that companionship in general is something that repeats itself throughout the story. It's Case has a girlfriend named Linda, and she is as broken as he is, but they have found each other in the mean streets of Chiba City, and they have
It's
found
interesting that
companionship. And
he doesn't e-date.
yeah, because life. That's the interesting part in Neuromancer as opposed to other cyberpunk books. Life is entirely outside the Matrix. The Matrix is for data.
Mm.
You don't even you just communicate over like basically phone with other people, but nothing happens online because there isn't any online. You might say that maybe Snow Crash won over Neuromancer in that regard, but in Neuromancer, the relationship to technology is highly utilitarian and instrumental.
I haven't read the sequels,
I haven't either.
but
I've only read Neuromancer, and
I believe, I believe there are two sequels. I could be wrong, but he's at least set it up to the point where that is changing, where the Matrix is about to be something more than just data. And you see at the end that Case, while he's back in a body, right, and while he's I guess more appreciative of that, uh, he's entering a sort of brave new world, where the technological matrix uh, is blurring between the real. It's the worlds are blurring together, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
One of my problems with reading sequels to such books is that they become self-referential, as the author is aware of his success and of the fact that he has committed a breakthrough and he has an effect on the world. And then the author's effect on the world begins to bleed through back into the novels. So I'm always leery of reading those sequels.
Now, fair enough. It's especially. I mean, the history of Neuromancer, but it was a huge deal as soon as it came out. I think he had a couple of short stories that were somewhat related, but this really put him on the map right away. Which, I mean, good for him, but
yeah, but when a book hits the popular consciousness like a grenade, you can't escape the popular consciousness effect back on the author. So I'm like deathly afraid of reading the sequels.
well, maybe you'll change your mind one day, and we'll end up doing this again on the sequels. I mean, we really haven't covered the plot so much, but the plot's also kind of unimportant.
I think, having reread the book 3 times now, I think that the book starts off really strong. And one of the interesting things about the book is that as it establishes most of what cyberpunk is, it is more of a noir story. And I don't know if you had a chance to listen to there's a reading by Gibson.
No, I didn't. I read it. I didn't listen to the audio version.
So, the first part, the Chiba City Blues, even starts with a blues track, the short blues track playing before he starts reading. And and as you get into the book, you get hit immediately with 2 strong impressions. One is the world being completely ruined, and the second is of technology having overtaken everything. By the immortal opening lines of "The sky above the port was the color of television, tuned to a dead channel." It's a kick-ass opening, and it's a real shame that the book couldn't follow through on this promise, because I think it's a really strong promise.
He's very inspired by noir, by the crime genre, especially Raymond Chandler, and throughout the plot of the book. Just we'll do a brief overview of the plot, because you're right. He kind of offers you something that he doesn't quite pay off, right? Case is a hacker. He's out of work, but he's brought this opportunity from a guy named Armitage. We later find out that he's working for the AI Wintermute, and he basically has to,
it's really sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, it's just the adventure of Case trying to figure out who he's working for, why he's working for him, because
and what's the goal? Like, what's the ambition?
Like, what he's clearly part of something much bigger than he's
and
being
he's working
led
towards something, and he has no clue.
Yeah, and that he doesn't necessarily care what the ends are. He's too sort of self-involved for that, but he also doesn't like being manipulated. Which I mean, very noirish. You can say that.
And every character in the book relates to everyone else through manipulation. There isn't one relationship in the book played straight, except for the bartender, who
Interesting.
just, quite apathetically and laconically comments regarding Case's state of mind. But throughout the introduction, Case is manipulated by his two-timing girlfriend. He is manipulated by Julie Dean, who fronts fronts and fences for different dealers and merchants, and he then gets manipulated and quite ham-fistedly by Armitage. And another thing that we can't ignore here, and it's quite ham-fisted, but both the metaphorically and literally, Case is in the underworld and dealing with the underworld. He has fallen from his version of heaven. He is offered a Faustian bargain by Armitage. Come work for me, and I will give you back your superpower. You'll get your mojo back, and he takes that deal without blinking, because he doesn't really care and he has nothing to lose, and there's nothing he wants more than punching deck and getting back into the Matrix. And whoever is pulling Armitage's strings knows that. And
it's funny.
Case was chosen.
Right. Yeah, Case was definitely chosen because of his desperation. Exactly. Wintermute has access to a lot of different information, so of course he would have run into Case before. At least, he before this he was a very famous hacker.
Yes, and he had famous teachers, and now he has absolutely nothing to lose.
And the way we describe it, it seems like a slam dunk. I can understand why people really dug this in the 1980s, but I don't know. The parts are all really good. You've got a detective fiction story. You've got the Matrix and cyberspace and all of this creativity. You have backstabbing and two-timing and manipulation all over the place. But I don't know. Together, it just doesn't work for me, which is really sad to say.
It's absolutely correct, and I think one of the problems is that it's dated. And
yeah, it does. It's very much of its time. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a sad result of being very much a product of its time. But for example, nobody cares about Japan anymore. All right, if you had swapped Japan for China, the book would be more engaging to a modern audience, because currently everyone is afraid about Chinese technology.
Right.
Chinese ascendants.
As of recording, DeepSeek was just sort of released, the Chinese equivalent of ChatGPT, OpenAI, for a fraction of the cost.
Yeah, a fraction of the operational cost, by the way, not necessarily the training cost, but
right.
We'll leave this autism for a different talk. But yeah, in industrially, technologically, demographically, China seems ascendant nowadays. Chinese corporations have their hands in every pie, right? You cannot name a technological company or corporation in America which isn't at least partially held by ByteDance, which is a Chinese-owned firm. And such firms and such fears and such relations were similar with Japan during the 80s.
Mm-hmm. Right. I remember, everything was Japan. Yeah, it was the post.
Was Sony.
Yep. Everything was, it was this post-war miracle, exactly. Right? That Japan was able to literally build itself back up after the firebombing of basically the whole country, not to mention 2 atomic bombs, and it became this juggernaut of industry. that
And everyone was fascinated by the Japanese corporation,
right,
the
right.
Japanese salaryman,
If you've seen, have you ever seen the film Die Hard?
of course.
Yes. Yeah. So
Nakatomi,
so yeah. So
yeah,
Nakatomi Plaza, and you know, an understated aspect of the film that is definitely present throughout, but isn't really commented on these days, is the sort of alienness of the Japanese corporation to John McClane. Like
yes,
you can empathize with him better because he's not only is he a New Yorker going to, even back then California was thought of as like this kind of weird place for weird people. Uh, but he's also stepping into the world of Japanese corporate dealings, right?
hierarchy, and yeah. How does he call the Japanese corporations in the book? I forgot the word for it, but he uses the Japanese word for the Japanese corporation, which are operated basically like tiny fiefdoms,
Right, right. Very
and,
much
and
the
fiefdoms
Japanese.
and cults.
Yes, the Japanese way of doing business has been the same ever since Oda Nobunaga. Like
Yeah,
it's you're loyal to your clan up until basically death, and you're. I had this one Japanese friend. He said the samurai never went away.
yeah,
They just either became the yakuza or they founded companies like Toyota.
yeah. That quote stuck with me, so I actually found it. He wondered briefly what it would be like working all your life for one zaibatsu. Company housing, company hymn, company funeral.
Zaibatsu. Okay, that's good.
Yeah,
I'll have to start using that in real life because it's interesting because America has been trying to do that for at least 20 years, maybe longer, right? You see companies like Amazon really trying to make their employee like
enforce their values.
yeah, yes, not only enforce their values, but also trying to squeeze out every little bit of efficiency they can out of their people, uh, but not understanding
That it's
that
reciprocal.
that they are people.
Yeah,
At least as messed up as the Japanese system might be, there's some dignity in being a worker for a Japanese company.
yeah. The Japanese zaibatsus understand that they have human capital, which
There's
would be
there's
like
a
Goro Yarvin's approach to it.
there if it's feudalism, they understand that feudalism is top down, but also bottom up.
Exactly. So we're skipping over a few things, but Case is picked up by Armitage. And one thing that is worth mentioning before we move on is that the third leg this story stands on, which makes it dated, is the Cold War,
Mm,
because we are given hints for it in the beginning of the book, but the war with the Russians happened in this book. We're past it. Um, it's in the first page, third paragraph, where Rats has a prosthetic arm because he got injured in the war. Um, so we get more information regarding the Cold War and how it turned into a hot war later, and we even meet one of its victims. But the Cold War had gone and passed and flared up as a hot war, and it's birthed uh, it birthed the first the first generation of modern hackers as they are envisioned in that book. Hackers were invented then. The new viruses were invented then, and they had a small nuclear exchange, which did not happen in our modern days.
Right.
So,
and there's this whole thing of now we have an entire sort of apparatus, this deep state sort of organization, whether it's NSA, whether it's a DIA, CIA, whatever intelligence agency you want to crop onto it, that is fighting a cyberspace war against, insert enemy here, right? Probably the most famous example of this is the destruction of the Iran nuclear program with the I can never say it, the Stuxnet virus, yes, which just so cool. The more you look into that, just how cool and how kind of scary. You kind of forget that, and this was what, 15 years ago, maybe. So the competency crisis might have caught up to us, but you often forget. You often forget how good at things America can be when the kid gloves are taken off.
America was certainly populated by steely-eyed missilemen.
Yes.
Or phrase, but another thing regarding that, and it brings me to the third leg which the book stands on, which is the third place where you have impedance mismatch with current day, is technology, which is something we have to talk about.
Yes, it's there are cybernetics, but they're almost always in service of the matrix. Right?
Yes, and the way technology was envisioned in this book, and it also kind of makes me wonder how much understanding of technology Gibson had in general, because it kind of reads a bit like fandom of reading, popular science and popular mechanics.
Right. Some of it does come off as like magic, basically.
And not only as magic, but the internet was taking shape during those days, and 40 years past the writing of this book, the protocols that were used to build the internet back then are still in use, to the great chagrin of everyone involved with networking infrastructure. We still have to worry about shit like BGP.
Right.
And
yeah, and even the development.
It seems like he never thought about, how does one just go somewhere? How does one connect to a thing? How are things interconnected, and how do they interrelate?
Right. There's never a shortage of copper, for instance.
Exactly.
And that is a really interesting part about the development of the modern internet. Is at first it was just sort of this patchwork piecemeal thing of, okay, we're just going to ride these already established phone lines,
and it still is.
Yeah, no, and yeah, it totally still is. There are some companies, like some ISP, some dedicated ISPs these days that are building their own infrastructure separate from the phone lines. But yeah, like especially your big internet service providers that still do like cable and phone, right? If anybody still has a house phone, Comcast got all this money to do a fiber optic ring around the nation, and they spent most of it, retaining phone customers. And that's neither here nor there. But there was a huge thing in the U.S. about that, and then in the end, it really didn't matter because we went wireless.
Yeah, and this is something that is absolutely not imagined. We went wireless, and miniaturization just ran way ahead than anything Gibson could have imagined.
Right. What was
now where we each have like terminals, very smart terminals that we can fit into the palm of our hands. Right? Case is carrying around a fucking deck. The listeners can't even imagine what that is. If you remember, like large PC towers, so imagine something wider, taller, and heavier that looks more like a mainframe. You can look up how the old mainframes look like. It's a huge ass tower, size as large as a man,
Right.
and that's his computer. That's what he
Yes.
uses to connect to the matrix. So connecting, there's an element of physicality that is completely absent from how we relate to technology today. Because today the internet is always at the palm of our hands, and that is not so for Case or anyone else in that world.
Yeah, you would think that Case was one. The image I had was like Case carrying around his own coffin, basically. But you've got to think that if you took Case and put him into this world and you handed him a phone, he would die.
Yeah, he would die because blood would not reach his brain after 4 hours of erection.
Or just the shock of it would just kill him, and he'd say like, "Well, where do I plug in my keyboard?" And
Yeah,
what is this? What is this interface device? You're telling me I can just touch things with my thumbs?
and the so
Thumbs are
on one
useless
hand,
to a
technology,
hacker.
yeah, like technology for us is like so way ahead of where it is for Case, but our interface with technology is so lame in relation to how it was envisioned in Neuromancer,
Right.
because we're still doing fucking text.
Yes, it's the
We
Virgin GUI versus the Chad surrounded by code and just interacting with it.
Yeah, it's like, and even our GUI, it's like, what fucking GUI? What's Twitter? It's a,
It's
it's
a
just text. You're just reading text that people send. It's like
It reminds
the
me of
the bandwidth, the data bandwidth is so low. We are engaging, uh, you know, half of one sense. We're using our eyes to read. It's so low density that it's amazing.
it reminds me of that one meme where it's like oh, we use coal to start a fire so it'll boil water and it'll spin this turbine, and then we uh, use nuclear fission to make an explosion that boils water to spin a turbine. And in the future, we're going to find some other sort of device that'll boil water and spin a turbine.
Yeah. So those are two impedance mismatches that exist between our modern technology, which make this book really hard to relate to. Because in one aspect, it's way ahead of us, and on another aspect, we're way ahead of it.
Yeah,
So this is
it's a
why the book
parallel
doesn't catch on
future.
anymore. Yeah, it is. It's an interesting future, but it's not the future that we're living in. So uh, modern readers will just experience this disconnect like every time. It's like someone hitting the brakes constantly. So I can understand why people get taken sharply out of the book.
So oh, we're coming up on time, and I wanted to get maybe a go no go from you. Is Neuromancer worth the read? Yes or no?
The answer is it depends. Um, because I don't think it's a good book. However, it had such a significant impact on modernity that if you want to understand why Mark Zuckerberg burnt billions of dollars to invest in the metaverse and rename his company, you should understand this book, because a lot of very influential people in Silicon Valley read this book when they were younger, and it stuck with them.
And they said, yeah, no, that's what I
and
want. I don't want any
and
sort of
it
human
still
interaction.
yeah, it still informs their actions in some way, I believe. So it's worth reading it for that.
Well, Mr. B, I appreciate you coming on, and again, thank you for indulging my weird schedule. Do you
It's a
have
pleasure.
anything? Do you have anything out there in the world that people can sort of check out if they want to know more about you?
Um, Absolutely nothing.
That's fine. You can find Mr. B somewhere in the Telegram verse. I'll leave it there.
Do not research any computing projects by Curtis Yarvin. Absolutely, do not research. Do not go there. You're not ready.
Well, thank you, my friend. And I don't know how to end podcasts, so I will just say insert ending here.